Good morning and welcome to the Bowling University studio from the International Bowling Campus in Arlington, Texas. I'm Bart Berger and I'll be your host for this edition of the Bowling University Tuesday Morning Profit Break. Thank you for joining us. The Tuesday Morning Profit Break is an opportunity for sharing insights on how to grow revenue, reduce cost, and enrich yourself, your team, and your business. Welcome to all of our new viewers and welcome back for those of you joining us again. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your busy day. We have another great show ready to share with you this morning. So grab your coffee or your morning favorite beverage and let's get started improving your profitability. Today we have with us from the Bowling University staff, Mr. Gerald Morrow. Before joining us here at the campus, Gerald had several years' experience in both marketing and operations with a multi-unit family-run chain in the Southeast. This morning, Gerald's going to talk with us a few minutes discussing the critical topic of customer service, or as we teach to here at the Bowling University, the guest experience. Understand exactly what customer service is, and most importantly, how to measure it. Good morning, Gerald. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Bart. Glad to be here. And we only have a short time today, and customer service, this is a big topic, and I know it's top of mind with a lot of people. So we're going to dive in and get right to it. We're not going to get through everything today, but we're going to get into a lot of stuff right here in this session. So what is customer service? What is it? We all know it when we see it. Great brands like Disney and Neiman Marcus and all of that, they have this standard of customer service. So what is the definition of customer service? If I asked you and I asked your team, I guarantee you the definitions would be different, completely different. So we've got to start to define what customer service is before we can start teaching customer service. And so often, myself included, we make that mistake in the center. We try to teach it, but we haven't really defined it for our team. So we've got to think about this. So customer service is no longer good enough. So we have to understand that customer service isn't good enough anymore, especially coming out of this pandemic on the road to recovery. We have to understand that the customer has to be the guest. Now, when we say guest, you invite a guest to your home. So it's a different term, it's a different meaning, and in service versus experience. So the whole idea is that the guest experience is even more important now than in the past. And this is critical. So where do we start? Where does this all begin? So whether you're the owner of the center, the general manager, the leadership, it starts with you. Now, you may not be in that ownership role. You may not be the general manager, but you're in charge of a team. It starts with you. So you've got to set the stage and be able to develop those standards and give your team some kind of a mission that they're moving forward with. Some of the other stuff is hiring the right talent, but the whole idea here is have a mission, create that culture, and everything in the end starts with you. You've got to be able to develop these standards, define them, and we're going to walk you through how we can get this process started, give you some tools and some resources to make this happen so you can start to train customer service and get your team to give great service. But before we start teaching this, we've got to understand what service standards are. So service standards are basically no more than, hey, we have to be able to have some kind of relationship. We've got to have a guide, some way of shaping that whole guest experience. How often does you have a team member that runs to you and says, hey, can you do this? Or I've got a guest that has this complaint. So these standards kind of give them a guide to be able to empower them and get them moving forward. So this is what service standards are. They develop those baseline standards so that way you don't have to go handle every situation. You can't be at the center 24/7. You've got to have time to work on your business and not in your business. So why are our service standards so important? Again, this is the opportunity to empower your team. This is a chance to let them have some authority to handle complaints, resolve issues. They shouldn't have to come to you and say, hey, there's no more paper towels in the restroom. That's something they can take care of. That's a service standard that, hey, we're going to check the restrooms and make sure they're properly equipped. So we've got to think about this. This allows them to meet those guest expectations and go along this guest journey. You want to give them some standards to be able to guide the guest along the process. And when you think about it, you want these standards to kind of set the tone for the overall guest experience and what that guest is going to leave feeling like after they visit your center. So it's all well and good, but what does this mean when you start talking about the bottom line? What are we talking about? How does this improve? So when you think about it, if we can increase guest frequency and we can increase the return on your investment of training your team, we can get guests to come back more frequently. It's going to increase your bottom line. Not to mention, if you can retain your guest, just a 5% increase in your guest retention can increase your profits by 95%. Again, powerful number. 5% retention can increase your profits by 95%. So that's where the dollars and cents come in to this whole idea of service standards and the guest experience. So what is that critical first step before we start training? We've got to understand what those service standards are and start to define them for our facility. This allows us to have a base level of standard. We all have A, B players and C players on your team, and how often do we try to make sure our A players are the ones out there because they give the best standard and service? So we want everybody to give that same standard. These standards allow us to make customer service, this ambiguous term, measurable. So this provides some consistency and things like that so that everybody's on the same page. No matter if I come in on Friday night or Sunday afternoon, I'm going to get the same level of service from your facility. So when we start talking about this, and hey, trust me, I've been guilty of this as well. We use terms like, go make the guest happy. Well, what does that mean? That level of service for make the guest happy, heck, to a 16 or 17-year-old that this is their first job, they have no idea. They can only give the level of service that they've ever experienced. So we've got to be very specific with our terms. We got to be able to empower our team members within a range. They've got to have some authority to know what they can and can't do and what they can authorize before they have to bring a manager or supervisor into it. So when we start thinking about these service standards, think about your phone. How many times does the phone ring before it is answered? Is there a standard for that? Is there a standard for how quickly a guest is greeted once they reach the counter? Or how quickly a guest is greeted down at the lanes and offered service as far as a drink or food? You can set a time to this. You can set the number of rings, but they've got to be realistic. You can't say, hey, the phone should never ring more than once. Is that really realistic? We've got to think about our experiences, our facility, our staff, and start to put these standards in place. Is it when somebody gets down to their lane that we have a server down there within the first minute, or is it 2 minutes? Do they have to have their drinks by a certain time? We can set these expectations and these standards. So when we start talking about service standards, I like to use this example. If I tell you my pleasure, for most of you around the country, if I say my pleasure, most of you immediately are going to think of Chick-fil-A. It's a chicken sandwich. But you know what? They're known across the country that if you say thank you, somebody's going to respond with my pleasure. And that's highly important. Here's another standard that's easy and simple to remember. Again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Starbucks, they use latte for a recovery standard. They want to make sure that you listen, you acknowledge, you take action, you thank the customer, and explain what you did in their service and how you fixed and handled the situation. So that Marriott, here's another example. They use the term learn, and it makes it easy. Listen, empathize, apologize, respond, and notify. So again, some simple standards that can be used. Why don't we train and execute service standards? Well, quite honestly, you know what? I'm guilty of it too. We say we don't have the time. But quite honestly, guest experience is probably the most important thing you have in your facility. And now, more so than ever, it should be top of mind. And don't think that you can't train. we're going to give you some tools and show you some ways that you can start to be able to train your team and define those standards. So as we get into this, before we can start defining and executing and measuring service standards, we've got to start with having an idea of what the mission is. So for the leadership at the facility, you're going to set the tone with your mission, vision, and values for leaders. This is a great course, under 30 minutes, kind of gets you in that process and gets things going. Then we have 3 courses to follow up: developing service standards, executing service standards, and measuring service standards. These go into more depth about some of the things we touched on and will help guide you through that process. So make sure you take a few minutes out of your day and check these out. Quite honestly, 2 hours to take all 4 of those courses, I think it's worth 2 hours of your time to get out there and actually start to get this process so that way you can train your team. So in the end, the first step, it starts with you. So you've got to set your service standards, define your service standards, and go from there. So what does customer service look like at your center? Again, all these courses are available in the on-demand online training program, and you can take them whenever you like, right there in the on-demand online training program through Bowling University. Bart?
Thanks, Gerald. That's a lot to think about. You gave us a lot of great stuff to consider there. And I love that you started with this whole idea of mission, vision, and values, and encourage you to think about that, because so many of us as small business operators, we're in the trenches and we're just so busy. We often want to jump to this customer service thing. So that aside, we built that foundation. How can we hold our team accountable for customer service or the guest experience?
So holding them accountable is easier once you have some solid service standards in place, being able to do something like measure the number of times the phone rings. There's also a couple courses for your frontline team members that can kind of give you some guide to those service standards. Maybe you have to greet somebody within 4 feet. Maybe you make eye contact at 10 feet away. Again, you can start to define these. We have some examples and some resources available for you, but being able to put a number or some kind of way that you can quantify it makes it much easier for you to hold your team accountable and be able to measure. We're not just holding them accountable for not doing it. We want to recognize when they do it and try to boost them up and kind of improve their own guest experience and their service that they offer there at the facility.
Yeah, that's good. That makes sense. And you think through that. So, look, we're on this road to recovery. There's a lot of things as a small business operator I have to do. I've got a lot of things on the checklist of things to do, and we all get that. But where does this roll? Where does the guest experience or customer service, where do you think this falls into the road to recovery?
Quite honestly, this is probably the most important part of that road to recovery, because for a lot of us, this is our second chance to make a first impression, and you're going to have people coming into your facility, and people are hyper aware of what's going on around them. And so if you can provide a great guest experience, and providing that great guest experience is going to allow them to come in more frequently, they're going to tell their friends, they're going to come back. And again, just looking at being able to increase their frequency is going to translate to the bottom line, and it's going to help you increase that foot traffic. You're going to get more people through the door, and you're going to get back to where you were before, and if not better, by having those service standards in place and being able to execute them and measure them and provide an awesome guest experience.
Good. And yeah, I mean, it does lay the foundation. It's got to lead the forefront of this recovery here. So I'm going to sneak in one more for you here before we let you go this morning, and that is that, look, again, we're busy. I've got my A team member. I've got my Gerald on my team. He's my A player. Why can't I just let Gerald train those service standards and let him go do it there? I got a lot of other things I need to be doing. Why can't Gerald just train them?
Man, I was guilty of this, and I'm sure most of you watch them that have hired people and put them out there. You just hire somebody, they have a pulse, you need to fill a shift on a Friday night, because if not, you're working it, and then you tell them, hey, go hang with Joe. He's going to show you how to do things. Well, Joe may have been your best employee, but he's also going to pass along some of those bad habits. And Joe decides what he likes to do and what he doesn't like to do and what he likes to share and how he likes to handle things. So Joe is going to teach your new team member to be like Joe. And he may not have all the greatest habits. So in order to level set that playing field, make sure the service is great from everybody in your team, having those standards allows everybody to be trained the same way. Once you take the time to develop these standards, that training program is easy. It's very easy. Takes a little bit of work up front. So as we always joke about when we say, you know what, it's not simple, but it is easy. We can do this. It takes a little bit of work, but we can get there. And once you get there, then it's much easier to onboard new team members.
No, good stuff. And thank you again, Gerald, for sharing that with this morning. So, folks, as we wrap up another edition of the Tuesday Morning Profit Break, remember that when your focus is on growing people, people will grow your business.